Welcome everyone. Today, as we've been promoting, I've got a special guest along today, Mike McHenry, and we will be having a bit of a chat on a different front rather than normally what we deal with Phil and myself, where we're talking around how to help clients in distress. Today, we wanted to focus a little bit on a different front and actually talk about how you can actually grow and develop and strengthen your business. So Mike McHenry, welcome. Thank you.
No worries.
Mike is from he's from Seamless SMSF. I have to say that slowly. I cannot get that out quickly.
Well, as soon as you pick seashells, give that a crack.
For those who haven't heard of Seamless before, Mike started the business in 2013 with 10 clients and 300 funds to look after. And over the last 8 years, he's developed that now into 267 clients and over 17,500 funds. And I suspect it's probably higher than that, because that's just the latest numbers that they are advertising. So he comes with some really good credentials, and I've heard him speak in a number of different places. So I'm really looking forward to picking his brain. As we mentioned in the invite, Mike's going to talk about a number of non-negotiables for business owners and executives. So hopefully, Mike, that's a good start to what it's all about. And I guess, mate, we'll jump straight into it in why develop this list of non-negotiables.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me, Ash. Well, I think firstly, look, there's no exact science when it comes to building a business. And I think through trial and error, and I've been in business a long time. Like I had an accounting practice for a lot of years, over a decade. And, you know, there were times where we tripped over as a group. We had multiple partners and we won awards. We were a pretty quick growing business, but there was always some inherent challenges, and some of the challenges, they generally revolve around people. Okay, so when you look at most businesses, their problems, if you say, what's your biggest problem? They'll say, oh, that's people. That's it. So whether it's internally, whether it's management, whether it's, you know, the strategic team, whether it's customers, suppliers, it's people. So we sort of get a focus on, oh, what software do we need, and where do we need to, through what lens do we need to improve our business? And we sort of fail to look at the key element, which is people.
Yep.
And so when I started this business, I set some rules. One rule for myself was, I'm not going into business with anyone. And that's not a reflection of where I'd been. I just felt, look, I want to do something different, and I just want to have a crack and do it my way.
Yep.
All right. That way I can land on my own sword. If my theory around how I want to run it works or not, at least it's of my own doing. That's the first part. So anyone that comes into the organisation, that's the first conversation I have with them.
Right.
You know, and it's just about being transparent. That, look, my plan is, I don't know that I need a partner. If I do need a partner, it's because we need an equity raise, or I need a specific skill set that will drive another element to the practice. So that's how I did it. But then again, the focus wasn't on, hey, let's grow this massive business either.
Yeah.
That was never the plan. The plan was just, I just want to have fun. You know, I just want to have fun, and I want to try something different. One thing's for certain, we're going to drop dead with zero Kanga, right? I think that's one of the key parts. And I think when you look at businesses, generally they're really ineffective.
Yeah. You
know, you got people that either need a Labrador or a long stick with a rubber ball on the end. They're flying blind in a lot of cases. And so it's really about having those clear rules on really what's the objective here. And a lot of accountants, even solicitors, they'd see it. They'd be involved in transactions with businesses where there's a business that might be suffering. They sell it and someone else comes in. It's the same business, same product they're selling, but they seem to be able to make it thrive. Or on the other hand, it just collapses. Yeah. Someone who has a really successful business, they sell it to someone else and they totally butcher the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we're, in the last 18 months, obviously it's been a really whirlwind environment for all of us. And some of, we've clearly seen over the last 18 months, a lot of businesses have really developed and bloomed because the being put under stress has made them actually think and change and and others are sitting dormant waiting to see if it'll get back to normal. And, you know, I think the stats are pretty horrific when it comes to small businesses and how successful they are over time. And, you know, over the years, us obviously dealing with clients in distress, we see a lot of businesses that fall over for a whole bunch of reasons, but there's often people in behind there somewhere.
Yeah.
So if we jump into your list, what would you consider to be, you know, well, what's the, you know, I think the first one on it is a business is a game. And I guess you mentioned that you wanted to have some fun. And I think if we're not having fun doing this day to day, then we're in some real strife trying to make it work. So do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's two contexts, right? So when you talk about business as a game, there's one part of it, we want to have a bit of fun, right? But the lens that I look through when I say business is a game is that most people that start a business, they actually think it's real. They actually think the concept of their business is the be all end all. And it really couldn't be further from the truth, right? You know, the priority of like businesses is just a game, and the measure of the game, of the stakes of the game, is money. So people look at it and they say, oh, mate, for me to be really successful at this game of business, I just have to have, you know, work it so I make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to, so when I started my business, I didn't want to look at it through that lens, because I went into it saying, I just want to have fun, right? I sold out of my accounting practice. I was comfortable, and I said, okay, I want to invest in infrastructure so that I can learn from previous mistakes and build something so that it takes the pressure off and I can actually enjoy living. What's really, really important is people. And we lose that fundamental concept of the people who we have in our charge, the people that we work with. Like, what are we trying to do for them? How are we trying to incentivize them? How are we trying to give their role purpose? You know, there's a real lack of leadership globally, not just in our local communities, not just within businesses, but generally there's a real lack of leadership. And people couldn't even define what leadership is, right? But I think, you know, if we look at business for what it is, that it is just a game, and you look at the Kerry Packers, your Robert Holmes of Courts, you know, Alan Bond, all these guys, it's a game. If life was about money, well, they currently have a net worth of zero, all of them. Why? They're brown bread, right? They're dead. They're not with us anymore, and we're all going to end up there. So I think if people can just stop focusing on money and just focus on the business and have fun and focus on people and what we're trying to achieve for them, the outcomes just take care of itself.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a really interesting one, and it's a hard one for people to understand, to accept and understand as well, because I mean, you know, money pays the bills and feeds the family and all the rest of it. Yeah. And it's almost a bit of a chicken and the egg type situation, isn't it? So
yeah, it is.
Know, we're understanding doing the people part and then going, oh, the money will flow. Well, someone's, you know, we see it all the time, is that, you know, they don't have the money to pay a bill, so therefore you've got a client in trouble, and off it goes from there.
Yeah.
So how in your mind do you balance that with a comment like that?
Well, look, I mean, the nature of businesses and people's financial positions, you have to get yourself into a position where money doesn't matter so much. Yeah, you really do, right? So if you're going to go into business, you've really got to try to put structure around it and have a vision of what you're trying to achieve, so that you can get to that point really quickly. So when I started, I knew that to replace an income, I really needed about 500-600 super funds to do those audits, to at least put myself in that comfortable position. So the focus was set up structure and to set up system and process, so that once we got that number, it took the pressure off. So everything else after that became easy. So you're right. It's not, oh, let's just go into it and it's not about money. Hey, it is. We've got to give it some perspective, but it's not the be all end all. And I think if we have a real focus of engaging everyone around what the objective is, it works a lot better. I mean, I had a friend who came up from Geelong to visit, and she was just doing some traveling. I went to school with her, and I had a really terrific high school experience. Anyway, this girl was with her husband, Sharon, and she came up because she got diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. It was actually misdiagnosed, and she got stage 4 breast cancer. They give her 6 months. And that was when I saw her, it was 7 months ago. So when I saw her, she was technically not supposed to be with us. So my point is, do people think that she's worried about money? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
That's a furthest thing from her mind. She's trying to see people. She's trying to just live. And I think we have to find that balance where we actually start to actually care about people, and we can see what an environment we're in. I mean, I'm not here to speculate or give an opinion on, this, what's going on in the world. But I mean, we see real division happen. And I think people are losing this focus on just, hey, what about us as a community? Once you start to get divisive, it's a super dangerous. It's very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, for communities to thrive, it's exactly that. You have to be a community.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to actually get together with a common goal, and that common goal should be, we all want to get well. We want to get rid of this bug, and we want to make sure everyone's okay, and have open dialogue around that. And if you start to censor people and you start to segregate people, that's a dangerous game that they're playing. And I think, again, it comes back to leadership. I mean, if we had a focus of trying to unite people instead of segregate people, I think we'd better chance to get to the end game.
Well, I think we could probably spend the rest of the webinar just talking about that whole issue and lack of leadership and all the rest of it. But
let's not.
I wouldn't mind moving on to one of the other non-negotiables that you've talked about, is that the business isn't you. And I think, a lot of the time we find, and it obviously is going to tie into people to a certain extent, but do you want to expand on that one a bit? Because I really like that one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when people start a business, it's often they'll start it in their own name, or they are the principal. Now, last time I checked, everyone's got an ego. Right? We all have. And when you go into business, you're putting yourself out in the marketplace. You're out front and center saying, hey, this is my business. And I think one of the biggest dangers, and for me, one of the non-negotiables, is you need to look at the business as if it's something totally separate to yourself. Okay, You've got to look from the outside in. You can't look at it that's you, because it's really hard to gauge and control your ego, because you start to make decisions based on how you're looking and how you're perceived in the marketplace, as opposed to what the business actually needs. So I mean, you see it all the time. When businesses start to struggle, they continue to spend, they may take on debt, they might even borrow from outside sources, friends, family, and then they get themselves in a real pickle, all because they're trying to maintain this facade that, look at me, I'm this successful business person.
Okay, right. So, and how like, if you have some practical tips on how people do that? Because I think sometimes it's, like we're, Dion Reed, where Hank Dion, our founder, who's an incredible businessman and has built a great business that I'm lucky enough to become a part of. But it's well beyond him. There's a history based on him, but the business is well beyond him now. But we've got a lot, looking at the people who are here, we've got a lot of smaller businesses who are 1, 2, 3, 4 size firms wanting to grow. And they may have a lot of clients who are in the same boat. So have you got any thoughts on how you do that?
Yeah, I mean, the first step is, don't go into your business undercapitalized. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it blows my mind how many people think, oh, I've got 20,000 shekels in the ashtray of the car. That should get me through. And then they think on a spreadsheet, if I have this many sales by this margin, I'm going to make X amount of dollars. I mean, hey, let's just throw anything on a spreadsheet. Yeah. Yeah. So I think people go in. I mean, this is why the numbers are that bad, right? I actually downloaded data from the Australian Bureau of Stats, and it was all the BAS lodgements for the 12 months up to December 2020. Now, we had disruption in business because of COVID, but they normalised those numbers. Now, the category of businesses that had revenue between 0 and 50,000 represented about a third of the market. Between 50 and 200,000 represented about a third of the market. Actually, I've got the numbers here. Let me go here. And between 200,000 and 2 million was about a third. It's about 30%, 30%, and 30%.
Right.
And the shift, the net movement between categories was the category up to 50,000 turnover and the category up to 200,000. So new participants came into the 50,000 revenue or below, and the net movement of the 50,000 to 200 was negative by 30,000. So it was almost a direct shift. So not many businesses actually progressed to a turnover of greater than 200,000. The net movement of businesses in the 2 million plus category, between 200,000 and 2 million, was only like 3,000 businesses. It was really nothing. So there's not a lot of movement. It's the challenges to all these businesses when they start business. Now they either prosper and get into that sub 200,000 turnover bracket, but then they either go broke or they move back into a sub 50,000 turnover business.
Right. Okay.
I reckon they're just undercapitalized. And if you're undercapitalized and there are people with all this enthusiasm, I'm going into business. This is what I don't want to do what the man tells me. So they go into business and they just seriously, they couldn't run a bath, let alone a business.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of people, you come back to that leadership, they're great technicians.
Correct.
Great technicians in what they do, and then they go, I want to do it for myself rather than for someone else.
Yeah.
And then moving into that next level. So,
That's right.
Yeah, and again, you come back to, another one of your non-negotiables is around the business model and not being in the, not having a clear business model. And, I think you call it the whirlpool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to have success, if you want to create a successful end game, for me, my priority was, and I'll give you an analogy. You go to a barbecue, and within about half an hour, if you start chatting to some different people, and there's a few people around, you sort of gravitate to a certain group.
Mm.
You'll gravitate to some people. Why do you gravitate to them? You gravitate to them, you've got a common interest, a common sense of humor, right? So everyone tends to gravitate, to who they enjoy being with. And I think as a starting point, I just wanted to make sure that when I built this business, I only want to spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week with people I actually enjoy being with.
Mm.
That was first and foremost. So I think to do that, you've got to be really clear on how you design your culture. So people sort of just go into business and they recruit people. They recruit people with the wrong end game, and they recruit people who have a specific expertise as opposed to what's their passion in behind their chest plate. Like, will they tear raw flesh from the bone? Because if your game is to play an aggressive growth game, you need those people. So for us to design a culture, I mean, that's a 2-hour presentation.
Yes. Yeah.
To understand how to do that, and we've got a framework that we follow religiously, and I present on it regularly.
Mm.
And it's something that businesses, particularly accounting firms, most of their clients have not built and designed their own culture. They actually don't know how to recruit to fit within that cultural framework, and they don't have that business model. They don't have they don't have the elements within it. They don't know what people they're trying to get. They don't have a strategy. They don't know how to execute, and they don't have a cash plan within that cultural framework.
Yeah, so just to expand on that a little bit, it's not so you don't think it's as much about having someone who's just purely got the skill, but there's got to be a driver behind them to want to, well, in your case, obviously not to get to a partnership level, but they want to have the passion to build and drive, at the moment, seamless for you.
Yeah, that's right. Well, look, here's another analogy. Let's say we're going to go to war. I don't want people who are signing up to come to war with me, but really all they're after is to try to get to wear a general's outfit with a few stripes on their shoulder so they can sit back, and I want someone beside me shoulder to shoulder who's ready to have a red hot crack, because that's how you actually win it, right? Yes, you need strategic planning, all that sort of stuff, but first and foremost, you want people who are prepared to get into the trenches with you.
Yeah.
And look, I think in this day and age that we can be a bit critical of millennials and young people. Now, I find them to be unbelievable.
Okay.
They're not IT averse. They're not risk averse. They understand how to access information quickly, so they're not scared of anything IT related. And that's the direction we're moving, right? So Would I prefer to employ someone of my vintage who's probably, oh, how do I do this? How do I do that? They sort of call me IT Mike in the office because they know I've got no idea. So we have a good giggle about it, right? But these guys, they just want to be involved in something. They want to know what that something is. They want us to tell them, right? So in business, you've got to have very clear values on how people are going to behave. You have to have very clear mission, okay, and a very clear vision, which is like a big, hairy, audacious goal. Like it has to be on a wall with a 3 to 5 year plan. It's got to, because you can't lead people if you don't know where the hell you're leading them.
Yes, yeah. And look,
counterintuitive.
And I think, and this conversation is probably just as relevant for the people listening for their own businesses as it is for their clients. But, I think I come from an era, I guess, where vision and missions were those fancy things out to the side that the Telstras and the Cokes and the big ones of the world had a whole department that just sat around, being a bit airy-fairy and coming up with it. But
wishy-washy.
Yeah, very. But bringing it down to even, I know that Hank and I have just gone through a process of redoing our visions and missions and bringing that out to our staff and driving that along. But it is something that does need to be done at even as the smaller businesses. And I think when you're one or two people, it's easy. But once you start getting a little bit bigger, it can get lost.
Yeah,
and that's a really powerful thing that, it doesn't matter what size of business you got. And when we're talking to our clients, what is the vision of your future? When we're talking about whether we restructure someone or shut them down, we want to know that they're passionate about it and that they've got a team that will come with them.
Yeah, mate, that's so true. I mean, but you know what the other big problem is, and you look at, hopefully there's no Essendon supporters on the one. But when they had this supplement saga, right, that issue, I mean, leadership and vision and all these things and values, I mean, what happens is people can put things on a wall and say, oh, this is our mission and this is our vision, these are our values. But if people aren't accountable to those and you don't have someone governing that, it's an absolute waste of time. And for us, I believe that is the game changer. That is the key. I mean, you've got to look through a lens before you even get into business. And before you start your business, you have to define this stuff. Because if you don't, then it becomes, oh, Ash, that behaviour there, mate, I don't know about that. What you did didn't make that person feel. And you go, oh, no, I don't reckon. No, it becomes your version against my version. Whereas when you set really clear rules, we can sit down and have a conversation. I'll have profiled you. I've got my own profile, and we can have a conversation about things that are written up in your profile for questions that you answered, that we can have a discussion so that stuff stops, like it just stops in an instant.
Yeah.
And I think it's very difficult for businesses to do that because no one really knows what the defined values are and what constitutes what's acceptable and what's not. So it becomes a he said, she said.
So and that, I guess, probably brings you into one of the other non-negotiables that you've got on your list, is that around having the systems and procedures around everything. So, I mean, for me as an ex-accountant as well, with my own practice, as systems and procedures, you think about how you take a tax return from way to go. We talk about how we move a file from way to go. But I'm guessing from what you're saying, it goes a little bit beyond just the workflow process.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, so people get confused with what is system and process. Well, why do we have two things there? The system is the facility that controls the process. So we have a process. We can write a process on a piece of paper, but the system is what actually makes sure that happens. So often what people do is they create a process, but there's no proof that the process was ever used. And sometimes people go, here's our process manual. They go to the bottom drawer, blow the dust off and go, here it is. Never been looked at. Staff don't even know it exists. So for us, I think the confusion that people make in business is that they think that people deliver outcomes. And that's not what happens, right? And like seriously, if I said, who delivers outcomes? They say people. They go, not in our business. The process delivers the outcome and the people follow the process. The people critique the process. The people measure the process. The people innovate and come up with ideas and test a new innovation. And then we put a process in, but everyone follows the process. So in our office, when we induct them day one, we say we have a process for everything. Someone has to go and get milk at the supermarket. They click on the process. It's got pictures of the map to get to what aisle it's in, what sort of milk we get, everything. It's in detail, in finite detail, because you send someone that can go and get some milk, they go down, they don't even know what they're getting. They could take half an hour. So it shows them where they get petty cash, who has to sign off on the petty cash, how it has to record. Zero variables, right? So I think when people understand that there's actually a missing cog in their business, and that is you have to have processes for everything. So you put the process in between the people and the outcomes, and it just works. So my question to people is, can you get your neighbour to come into your office, sit them on a seat, open a process at the start of the process, and can they follow the process and deliver an outcome? Someone who knows nothing about that process, can they do it?
Right.
And if they can't, how can they? What do you have to do to your process so that they could? Do you embed videos? Like what level of detail? So you could have two processes for the one thing. You could have a simplified process and a complex process. Complex for the first 6 months that they're learning, and then after that they have a simplified process, but it's got to be ticked off and quarantined so it was actually followed. So then there's accountability.
Right. So, but that in itself is really interesting. You're saying that people are the key, and you want creative, forward-thinking people that you go into battle with, and yet you're then turning around and saying, well, they need to follow this exact process. Yeah. So you're almost, and forgive me if I've obviously missed something, but isn't that almost counterintuitive that you're saying, I want people who are right there at the peak of it, but I don't want them to have any thought. They just need to follow a process. Then how does that marry together? Yeah.
Well, look, no one's got Dorothy's slippers where they click their heels 3 times together and go, just create a process. Oh, there it is. Okay, people, now I want you to be robotic and follow this. All right, the process comes from somewhere. And so we have project teams and everyone's involved in that. So the last 6 months, we had 7 project teams. There was about 6 or 7 people allocated to each team. And they were clear on what the project was and what outcomes that we wanted to achieve. And they were left to their own devices. So they know what we currently do, but they knew what we were trying to achieve from modifying it. So you need innovators, you need innovative thinkers, but once that process is locked in, so what we do is, what's the process? We test and measure it. Then we roll it out on a sample to confirm proof of concept that this process is better than the previous one. And then we have a transition model to transition a new process in. And we remove the old process out, and the new one comes in and it gets rolled out across the practice. Not, they do a bit and they do a bit. It's uniform. And then the rule is you only get one warning. If you don't follow the process, I warn you once. If you don't follow it twice, we'll find another place for you to work. Really simple.
Okay.
Yeah. The rules are simple. So you're right. It's not, I hear your point, but that's only if there's they're not involved in that process. The one thing about processes is this. Often what we do is we allocate someone and say, can you come up with a process to be able to do this function? And it might be, I don't know, it might be a whole different software program which is quite significant for your practice. The danger with that is you've just empowered someone where you then haven't tested to make sure it's right. That person's now really proud of what the process they think they've created, which is the gold standard. So then in 6 to 12 months time, if you find there are flaws in it and there becomes problems, you have now someone who is digging their heels in based on an ego that it was their process they created, and how dare you question it? Yeah. So there's a way that you create a process, and it always comes back to me. So they have to prove the process to me, and then I go through that process, because then I know exactly how it works and I can put my 2 bob in. So what about this? Does it fix this? Does it fix that? Okay, go back. And then I sign it off. Once we do, then we transition it out and roll it out. Okay,
yeah, well, it's certainly really interesting, and I think that still gives you a lot of flexibility within that, doesn't it? And you're setting up things to, as you say, for outcomes, and allow the freedom to move on to other stuff.
And more importantly too, Ash, is the team jumping out of their skin. Mate, This is their business. It's not Mike's business telling them what to do. We are creating something. We create our culture. We create our rules. We all stick to our rules. And if people don't want to play, that's okay. They can play their game with someone else, and that's fine, right? I don't have a gun at anyone's head, but if they're going to stifle what we do, which stifles our growth, well, then that limits opportunity for the rest of the team. And in my view, that's totally unacceptable.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And that probably leads into one of the other notes I had on your non-negotiable, which is create lanes that rotate governors.
Yeah.
So you want to expand on that one?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so the business has got lots of different lanes. So we have lots of different teams. So in my view, as your business grows, I call it the pizza rule. So a team, you should be able to feed a team with 2 family-sized pizzas. If they're all still hungry after eating those 2 family pizzas, your team is too big.
Okay.
It needs to be dissected. And if there's pizza left over, you can afford to put another body into that team. Okay. So generally the team size is somewhere between 6 to 8 people is a manageable team. Because that
so you don't have people like me on there where I can eat a whole family pizza on my own.
I have to bring in the salad rule, and that's a different rule. But yeah, so you've got to try to find a guide that works, and the reason for that is that size allows everyone to participate, right? And so what we do then is every morning there's team huddles. Every team has their huddle, and they go through who has what on. They follow a set agenda, right? And when they have that, then we have a group lane meeting. And everyone in different lanes and different teams, they come together and they report and they follow a whole new agenda. And that happens every day.
Right.
That happens at 8:45 on the dot every morning. It doesn't happen at 8:46 and it doesn't happen at 8:44. It happens at 8:45 every morning, and that agenda is followed, and different people rotate. Every day, someone else presents on behalf of their team or on behalf of a lane. And what that does is it encourages them to be accountable. So it's not about the need to stand up and present. The point of presenting confirms to everyone in the organisation that this team has done their homework and they know exactly who is doing what. Because if I didn't get them up to speak, you don't really know that they've done it.
Yeah.
Well, how do you know that they've actually set their day up and everyone's time is allocated for, and we know what our game plan is? Like, someone has to govern client inquiries that come in. One team says, we've got 7 client inquiries. They've been in there for just under 24 hours. Humphrey Bear's doing those. And they go through their team's allocation of functions for their day. And that's how we do it, right? So that way there's no cracks. There's nothing gets missed. And we change the governors so that everyone has a chance to lead, right? It improves their social skills. It gives them confidence that they belong, which is important.
So when you talk lanes, you're talking functions within the business, or so that's, each function, and then a governor is someone who reports on behalf of that function.
Yeah, exactly. And that comes down to even like cleaning. So we clean our own office. And people go, what do you mean you clean your own office? What, don't you get cleaners in? I go, well, our view is one of our values is respect. So if we respect each other, then when we eat, clean up after yourself. Yeah. Don't rely on someone else to clean your mess, right? Yeah. You clean everything, and there's a standard. And then we have a governor at the end of lunch that checks it. Everything's clean, everything's put away, all chairs are lined up, everything's back to where it should be. Table tennis bats are back in the box, pool cues are on the rack. You know, so we set up an environment they can have fun, but if they don't follow the rules, that all gets shut down, right? Yeah.
That makes sense.
So you need governance. And again, Essendon Football Club, there's another classic example. Now, they might, through that supplements saga, they might have had systems and process. They might have had that. But if you don't have governance that someone reports on, who knows what's happening? And that's where they failed from a governance point of view. That the systems and the processes that we have built within the business are actually being followed and being used.
That makes sense. It's one of those things. It's a combination of rigidity and then giving the freedom because of the rigidity. It makes sense. And I know there's a number of business models that talk about having the morning huddles. I mean, it's something that we do. Ours aren't all the same time because we talk in different time zones and stuff like that, but it is a really powerful part of the business. So, look, we are coming towards the end of the time, and I want to leave some time. You've had some really good little thoughts there. So if anyone listening has any questions for Mike, you can either put them in the chat box or raise your hand, and someone in my team will let me know that your hand is raised, because I'm not quite sure how to look for that. But if you've got any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. And while we're waiting for people to formulate that, there's one other one that I just wanted to cover off on, and that was one of those was you talk about rhythm and routine, and you hear a little bit about that with your morning huddle, but you want to expand on that one, because I think that's a really interesting one as well.
Yeah. Well, probably the best way I can explain it is when COVID hit and people were, we couldn't go into the office and people were working from home, by default, people stepped outside the normal process, right? Because suddenly we were trying to work out, well, how do we communicate? How do we have our huddles? How do we have our lane meetings? And so what happened was the agenda started to become compromised. So not all agenda items were discussed. So over the next two months, we found little 1%ers, little things that were happening. We were getting client feedback saying, oh, this hasn't happened or that hasn't happened. Now, rhythms and routines are, and how often do you see it in businesses? They say, yeah, we'll have a meeting. We'll have a meeting every Monday morning or every Monday. But then someone says, oh, look, I can't be in the meeting next week. And so then the meeting starts to happen two times out of every 3 weeks. Then it starts to happen at different times. Our rules are, when we set the rules, that's our integrity. Integrity is one of our values. So everything points back to our values, and everything points back to what we want to be as a business, which is we want to be outstanding. And for that to happen, things must happen when we said they're going to happen, on time, every time.
Yeah.
And so a rhythm and routine, people get in the habit, people get in the behavior. And so it's that repetitive nature that the moment it becomes boring is the moment you say, this is working. Yeah. That's what you want, right? Because if you don't have rhythm and routine, suddenly we think, oh, geez, this isn't working. We need to get some high-powered HR person. We need to get some really experienced person, right? And so we have this dependency on this person so they can manage it. Management for me is code for we don't have very good systems and processes, no governance and no rhythm and routine. That's what that means. Right. Because if you need someone to manage others, why do people need to be managed? Are they that pathetically hopeless that they actually need to be managed?
Yeah.
Or why don't we put a structure in so they know what their expectations are and they just deliver?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, again, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And we've all been to that point. It's like, why are we bothering to do this? Because it's almost boring that we do it all the time. But that's where you want to get to.
That's right.
Yeah. So I guess we've either completely knocked them out, or the questions that are too hard for today. There isn't that much popping up. But look, we will start to wrap it up, and there's some absolute nuggets in there, and I think each one of those we could spend an hour on in itself. And I really appreciate you taking the time up there on the lovely sunny coast, out in the free part of the world at the moment. We got some of the Sydney people are getting a bit excited because their Freedom Day is Monday, and I've given up trying to work out when mine is.
Just hang in there. Feel for everyone. It's horrible.
And the Western states, they've never known that there was actually a reason not to go out. So. Look, I really do appreciate it. For those should see that the webinar feedback, our questions there, so please jump in and have some thoughts. It's great, Mike, having you along. If people want to come along again this afternoon, we have another session at 1 o'clock. We'll probably try and stay close, but I don't know that you and I will be able to stay that close on the track. So it might almost be like a second webinar.
No worries,
Look, I really appreciate your comments and thoughts. There's some great nuggets in there, and I think for us at De Jong Reed, we were really excited about having you on, not only to give some nuggets for our referrers and everyone that comes along, but there's some things that you can take away that you can use for your clients to help them navigate as well. Yeah. I think for me, certainly cleaning up that system and process is makes a lot of sense. So, Mike,
Okay.
thank you very much for your time. It's been great having you on, and we'll catch you this afternoon. And for everyone listening, thank you all. Do you have any final words, mate, that you want to put out to anyone?
No, I think the main thing is just pick one thing and just focus on it and do it first, right? Just don't look at the whole, it's too big. Just focus on one thing, get your team involved. But if you don't design a culture and values that you want and get everyone involved in that, you're on the back foot to begin with.
Yeah, okay, awesome. Thanks very much, Mike. We'll catch
Good
up
on you,
again
mate.
soon. All right.
See you, Ash.
Cheers.
See you, everyone. Thank
Bye.
you.